Hello friends, and welcome to my new video. Today I'm going to read for you Snow White and Rose Red from this book. I hope you like it and subscribe my channel. Let's go. Snowflakes swirled down from the night sky. It was bitterly cold, but inside the little cottage at the edge of the forest, a welcoming fire glowed. Snow White and her sister Rose Red were huddled beside the fire, listening carefully. Their mother was telling them a story. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. "Who can be out on a night like this?" said Snow White. "I'll go and see," said Rose Red. She opened the door and let out a scream. Towering over her was an enormous black bear. "Don't be afraid," said the bear softly. "I won't hurt you. I just want to warm myself a little beside the fire." "Poor bear," said the mother. "Forgive my daughter. Come inside and make yourself at home." "Thank you," replied the bear. He dropped down onto all fours and shook his shaggy coat, sending snowflakes showering everywhere. Snow White watched nervously as the huge beast lumbered over and settled down on the rug. She had never seen a bear before. At first the two sisters kept their distance, but the bear seemed so gentle that their fear soon fell away. Slowly they crept closer to get a better look at him. The bear lifted his sleepy head. "Why don't you sit beside me?" he murmured. Feeling bolder, they kneeled down and stroked his thick fur. The bear gave a contented growl. Gradually, the growling became a snore. Snow White and Rose Red snuggled up to him, and before long, all three of them were fast asleep. When morning came, the bear padded into the forest, leaving a trail of giant paw prints behind him in the snow. "You will come back, won't you?" begged Snow White as they waved goodbye. "If you have me," the bear called back over his shoulder. The next night he returned, and the night after, and for many nights after that. Snow White and Rose Red looked forward to his visits more and more. They fed him honey buns, tickled his tummy, and played hide and seek. In return, the bear gave them rides on his back and showed them how to make a den. But time passed by quickly. The snow melted away and a carpet of bluebells spread across the forest. Spring had arrived. "I'm afraid I must go away for a while," announced the bear one morning. "Why?" cried Snow White. "Have we done something to upset you?" "Of course not," replied the bear. "I have to go and guard my treasure from the wicked dwarfs in the forest. During the winter, when the ground is frozen, they hide away in their caves. But now that spring is here, they come out and make mischief." Snow White and Rose Red tried to change their friend's mind, but nothing they could say would persuade him to stay. Burying their faces in his fur, they hugged him tightly. "We'll miss you," they said. "I'll miss you too," said the bear tenderly, "but I'll be back as soon as I can." They opened the door and the bear slipped outside. As he did, his fur caught on the bolt and a piece tore off. Snow White saw a flash of gold beneath, but before she could say anything, the bear had disappeared into the forest. A few days later, Snow White and Rose Red went into the forest to collect some firewood. They hadn't gone far when they caught sight of a strange little creature hopping up and down in the long grass. As they got closer, they realized that it was a dwarf. He had a long white beard and an angry pink face. "Is there something wrong?" asked Rose Red. "Of course there's something wrong," he snapped. "Can't you see my beard is trapped?" Rose Red looked and saw that the dwarf's beard was tangled up in some brambles. "Oh dear," she said, "how did that happen?" "I haven't got all day to stand around answering your foolish questions," he grumbled. "Hurry up and set me free." Snow White and Rose Red gave the dwarf's beard a tug, but it was no use. "Wait," said Snow White, "I've got an idea." She reached into her pocket and pulled out her sewing scissors. Then, with a snippety snip, she chopped off the end of his beard. "You silly goose," he howled. "Look what you've done to my lovely beard." Snow White opened her mouth to reply, but the dwarf was already busy scrambling under the bush. He pulled out a bag of gold and slung it over his shoulder. Muttering and spluttering, he stumped away. A few days later, Snow White and Rose Red went down to the river to catch some fish for supper. "Look over there," said Rose Red. "It's that funny little man again." Sure enough, there was the dwarf jumping up and down among the reeds like a crazy frog. This time he'd managed to get his beard caught up in his fishing line. "Not you too again," he groaned when he saw them. "You bring nothing but bad luck." Just then, a hungry fish came along and swallowed the worm on the end of the fishing line. As it tried to swim away, the dwarf found himself being dragged towards the water's edge. "Don't just stand there, you lazy lumps. Do something," he shrieked. Snow White and Rose Red rushed over to help, but try as they might, they couldn't free him. Once again, Snow White took out her scissors and, with a snippety snip, she chopped off some more of his beard. "What did you do that for?" The dwarf exploded. "There's nothing left of it. I'll never be able to show my face again." Without another word, he fished a bag of pearls from among the reeds and marched off. A few weeks later, Snow White and Rose Red were on their way into town when they spotted an eagle flying low over the fields. It circled around and around. Then suddenly it swooped down behind a hedge. The two girls heard a cry and ran to see what was happening. "Let me go," came an irritable voice. It was the dwarf again. The eagle had seized him in its claws and was about to fly away. "Leave him alone," shouted Rose Red boldly, but the eagle took no notice. Beating its mighty wings, it lifted the dwarf right off the ground. Quickly, Rose Red grabbed the dwarf's coat while Snow White held on to Rose Red's waist. The eagle pulled one way and the two sisters pulled the other, dragging the dwarf to and fro. After a few minutes of tug of war, the eagle finally let go, and the dwarf tumbled down to the ground. Grumbling loudly, he scrambled to his feet and dusted himself down. "Look at the state of my coat," he complained. "Clumsy oafs! You should be more careful." Then, picking up a bag of jewels from underneath the hedge, the dwarf stormed away. Snow White looked at Rose Red and they both shrugged. There's just no pleasing some people, said Rose Red. When they were on their way home later that afternoon, Snow White and Rose Red came across the dwarf yet again. This time he was crouching down, counting something on the ground. He tried to hide it, but it was too late. The two girls stopped and stared. Scattered in front of him were thousands of diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and sapphires, all shimmering and sparkling in the sunlight. "What do you think you're looking at?" yelled the dwarf. He picked up a rock and was about to throw it at them when he heard a low growl behind him. The dwarf spun around and saw a huge black bear heading straight towards him. It was baring its teeth menacingly. There was no time to run, so he had to think quickly. "Please spare me, Mr. Bear," he begged. "A little creature like me would hardly provide a mouthful for such a great beast. You should take these two girls instead. They'd made a much tastier dinner." The bear gave an angry snort. It raised its paw and struck the dwarf with all its might. The dwarf staggered and fell to the ground stone dead. Snow White and Rose Red turned to run away. "Wait, don't be afraid," called the bear. "I won't hurt you." The girls stopped in their tracks. His voice was familiar. Filled with excitement, they turned to greet their old friend. But the bear was no longer there. In his place was a handsome young man dressed in fine robes. "Who are you?" gasped Snow White. "I'm a prince," he answered. "That evil dwarf bewitched me and then stole all my father's treasure. For more than a year I have roamed the forest as a bear. Only his death could set me free. Now at last the spell is broken." Snow White hung her head sadly. "Is something wrong?" asked the prince. "I thought you'd be pleased for me." "I am," said Snow White. "It's just that I miss our friend the bear." "I'm just the same inside," said the prince, "and I hope I become your friend too." Snow White smiled. "You already are," she answered shyly. In fact, they became much more than friends. They fell in love, and a few years later they were married in his father's palace. Since Snow White and Rose Red had always been inseparable, you won't be at all surprised to hear that she married the prince's brother. And of course, they all lived happily ever after. I hope you liked that and subscribe my channel. See you next time.